So my name is Anna Gold. I'm a professor of auditing at the Vrije Universiteit in Amsterdam. And my research interest is, broadly speaking, behavioral research in auditing, so judgment decision making. And in these past years, I've focused increasingly on auditors' use of technology. Today I'm here with Xiaoxing Li, who's my PhD student in her last year. So almost, as we call it, on the job market, or actually on the job market. So sadly, she will be leaving us next year probably, but fortunately, she's leaving us with a great pipeline of papers, two of which we are here to present to you today. And as Jan already introduced, both of them very much related to the use of IT, technology in different ways. But what combines our interests is that we're both very interested in not so much the technological aspects of technology use, but more how does that influence behavior and judgments and decisions of auditors. And where we're particularly interested, everybody is always very much about all the hypes and all the benefits that IT can bring us and artificial intelligence, data analytics. And I think we all agree that they do have a lot of benefits, but we also want to point out some of the drawbacks and potential problems that we believe that audit firms should be aware of.
Now I'm going to present the first study, which is titled Inheriting versus Developing Data Analytic Tests and Auditors' Professional Skepticism. So as the title suggests, that in this study, we look at the use of data analytics, audit data analytics, ADA, right? And here is a widely adopted definition about ADA, which is included by the AICPA's ADA guide, that they define the ADA as the science and art of discovering and analyzing patterns, identifying anomalies, and extracting other useful information in the data related to the audit matter through various techniques, right? For example, analysis, modeling, and visualization, and at various stages of the audits. For example, in the planning, but also in the performing of the audit. And here, from this definition, we can see there are multiple benefits related to auditors' use of data analytics, right? For example, there are many useful information that auditors can get from using those ADA tests. However, in this study, we wonder whether the realization of those benefits could depend on whether or how the ADA test is generated. So in this study, we distinguish two scenarios. So in one scenario, auditors may personally engage in the development of the ADA test that they use in their audit testing. For example, auditors themselves may dedicate hours to identifying the data sources and collecting the data, verifying the data reliabilities, and also presenting the data results. And here we label this scenario as the develop. And on the other hand, there are also cases or situations where auditors inherit ADA tests or the test results developed by others to use in their audit testing. So for example, another audit team member or a centralized data analytics function could develop those ADA tests for auditors, and then auditors are provided with the test or the testing results from others, right? And here we label this scenario as the inherit. So we expect that when auditors are personally engaged in the development of those ADA tests, they are likely to cultivate psychological ownership of the test, which is the feeling that they feel the ADA test is theirs, right? Because they have more control over the ADA test, so how that's developed and how that's performed, and they feel more associated with the ADA test. And of course, they themselves invest time and effort into the ADA test that they use, which will all increase their psychological ownership of the ADA test. Therefore, when it comes to skepticism, so when the ADA test identify red flags which auditors are supposed to investigate, this psychological ownership could motivate them to further investigate, to be responsible, to take care of the red flags that is identified by the ADA test. On the other hand, when the inherent ADA test developed by others, it could potentially impair auditors' psychological ownership that they feel towards the ADA test. Basically reduce the feeling that they feel the ADA test is theirs. Right? Because in this case, they don't have much control over how the ADA test is developed and how that's implemented, and they don't feel much association with the ADA test because they themselves did not invest any effort and time into the ADA test development. So all of those would create barriers to the formation of psychological ownership that they feel regard the ADA test, right? And then when the ADA test identify red flags, they may become more hesitant to exercise their skepticism regarding reacting to those red flags. So in our first hypothesis, we expect that when a red flag is identified by an ADA test, auditors who inherit the ADA test will apply a lower level of skeptical action compared to auditors who have engaged in the development of the ADA test. Now, so it seems problematic, right, this inheriting ADA situation, which is, we believe is going to be a very big part in the future audit, especially with the more advanced technologies being increasingly used in the audit practice, right? So we can expect that in the future, the auditors may more commonly encounter situations where they inherit ADA tests or test results from others. So are there any solutions then to this inheriting ADA problem? So in this study, we indeed test the effectiveness of a potential solution that we propose, that is to inform auditors about the ADA test development activities. So for example, there could be an ADA memo documenting the ADA test development activities that could inform auditors about the ADA test development process, right? And we expect in this way, auditors will increase their feeling of association with the ADA test, and therefore, when there is red flags identified by those ADA tests, they are more willing to take care of that. So in the second hypothesis, we expect that when a red flag is identified by an ADA test, that auditors who inherit the ADA test but also informed about the ADA test development activities will apply a higher level of skeptical action compared to auditors who simply inherit without being informed. So here comes the results related to our first hypothesis, right? We compare develop versus inherit. So here the red bars are the skeptical action level for the inherit ADA condition, and the green bars are for the developed ADA condition. And here we can see for both additional testing and communicate red flag, so for both of those two measures, the level of skeptical action in the inherit is lower than that in the develop, indicating that indeed inheriting ADA seems to impair auditors' skeptical actions when they use the ADA test. And the result for the second hypothesis, where we test the effectiveness of the solution that we propose, right? So that is reflected by the blue bars here, where informed ADA conditions are represented. And so here, especially for this communicate red flag skeptical action measure we use, we can see that the level of the blue bar, the informed ADA, is substantially higher or increased compared to the purely inherent ADA condition, indicating that it seems that our solution that we propose is effective in increasing auditors' skeptical action when they inherit ADA test. So then what are the takeaways from this study, right? So although we often perceive ADA tests as providing many benefits to audit. Actually, this study, we found that the realization of the ADA test benefit depend on auditors' involvement in the development of those tests, right? And inheriting ADA tests, which may become more common in the future, could potentially create challenge to auditors' professional skepticism when they use those tests. But we also provide a potential remedy to this inheriting ADA problem, right? That is to keep auditors in the loop and being informed about ADA test development activities, for example, through an ADA memo, so that they will increase their own feeling of ownership and their skeptical action when they inherit the ADA test.
Yeah. And we'll carry on with the second study.
Yeah. So the second study that I'm going to present is titled An Unintended Consequence of Full Population Testing on Auditors' Professional Skepticism. And the research team of this study, again, consists of the three of us, so Anna, Joe, and me. So first I want to give you an overview of the study in a nutshell, because this experiment is a bit complex. So in this study, we look at the use of full population testing. So advancement in data processing and data analytics nowadays increasingly allow auditors to test the entire population of the client data instead of only examining a chosen sample and draw their conclusion based on sampling method. So here, in the case of full population testing, the evidence sufficiency evaluation potentially becomes a simpler, more readily accessible evaluation that auditors can make. Why? Because full population testing tests the entire population, right? 100% of the transactions underlying the account balance, potentially makes auditors to more easily conclude that they have obtained sufficient evidence. And on the other hand, the evidence appropriateness evaluation remains to be a complex evaluation. And why? Because full population testing only increases the extent of the audit testing, but rather does not change, for example, the reliability of the information, the relevance of the information, those factors that influence evidence appropriateness evaluation. Therefore, auditors may use their sufficiency evaluation to substitute for their appropriateness evaluation and conclude that full population testing provides more appropriate evidence. And since they perceive that they have obtained appropriate evidence, they may relax the need for more appropriate evidence from other sources that are not included in the full population testing, for example, external evidence. Right? So, and evaluation of external evidence is important for auditors' skepticism and fraud detection. Why? Because, for example, the industry trend compared to the client sales growth, if there is a big discrepancy, this may indicate a potential red flag as observed by prior research that auditors should investigate. So, because of this reduced need for more appropriate evidence, and if such evidence reveals red flag, this reduced reliance could potentially hurt auditor skepticism and audit quality. So in this hypothesis, we expect that auditors using full population testing compared to sample testing are less likely to act skeptically when a fraud red flag related to external evidence is subsequently encountered. So the result shows that in the sample testing condition, 65% of the auditors would communicate that external industry growth red flag, while only 48% in the full population testing condition would do that. And also it's interesting to interpret the coefficient here. So it indicates that auditors in the full population testing condition are 52% less likely to exercise skeptical action compared to those in the sample testing condition. So then what are the takeaways from this study? So basically here we reviewed an unintended consequence for population testing on auditors' evidence evaluations and their professional skepticism. And it also helps us to understand auditors' evidence sufficiency and appropriateness evaluation. While audit standards clearly define and distinguish between those two concepts, there are many ambiguities regarding how auditors really evaluate those two constructs in practice. Right? So specifically, standards seems to define a unidirectional relationship between those two constructs, that appropriateness influences the sufficiency of the evidence needed, but not the other way around. However, what we observe here seems that auditors kind of misinterpret that relationships as bidirectional, that appropriateness can influence the sufficiency needed, but also that obtaining a larger quantity of evidence can increase the appropriateness of that lower quality evidence. So we think the finding of our study could inform the audit standard setters, but also have important implications for the audit practice, for example, regarding audit firms' training programs.
I would like to thank you all very, very much for participating so actively and giving us a lot to think about for our follow-up studies. And if you ever feel like, wow, this is something I would like to discuss in more detail with you, please do reach out to us, because I think that's exactly why we're here.
Yeah.
Thank you.